Well, first and foremost, I want to thank everybody for coming today. We appreciate your time, especially in the evening like this. This is obviously a very difficult day and a difficult decision for us all. We've decided to, as you know, part ways with Scott as our head coach after 7 years and 8 in the organization in total. Before I go further, I think it's important to stress that this decision is not connected or related to the results of last season. In fact, I'm not sure that anybody could have done a better job than what Scott was able to do and what the team was able to do given the circumstances that we encountered. This decision is simply based on our assessment of what is needed for our organization as we look to the future. This is a transition, one that we feel we need to stimulate the program at this particular time, and that will allow us to evolve, progress, and ultimately sustain that progress. There's no way to quantify what Scott has meant to this organization, nor direct the necessary amount of praise for getting us to the point that we are in our development as a Thunder. We have a deep, deep respect for Scott Brooks as a professional and as a person, and whomever will assume the role of the next Thunder head coach will have a great foundation to work off of, thanks to Scott. In terms of thought process and how we arrived at this decision, as I stepped back and I reflected on this past season and seasons past, I found myself thinking about what was next, how do we progress, how do we evolve, and ultimately how do we transition to a point so that we're continuously and relentlessly building the organization we envision. I looked at the option and studied the option of Scott returning very closely, but he would have been entering the final year of a 4-year contract, and after a lot of thought and deliberation, and although I think Scott would have been very comfortable coaching on that, I did not feel we were in a position to make another long-term commitment based on what I felt was simply a natural need for transition. Change in organizations are necessary at times. As much as continuity is required for lasting success, change and transition are the engine for progress and evolution. And so we're embracing that change and looking toward the next stage in the development of our organization in Oklahoma City. I believe waiting to make a change of this nature or backing away from a decision such as this when you feel that the organization as a whole could benefit from the stimulus of change is not staying true to our mission of trying to continuously build, enhance, and sustain a great organization in Oklahoma City. This decision was complex on many levels, but I have to navigate these situations and these dynamics by always placing the needs of the organization above all else. Ultimately, we had to make this decision about what was next, what we felt would be most productive as we looked forward, and we could not make this decision about the past. We've been very fortunate to experience some great results over the past years. However, we have to be in position to believe that those results can be sustained and improved upon based on how they're produced, and in an ever-changing NBA, we have to adapt, we have to continue to build. Difficult decisions often stand in the way of this type of progress and this type of thinking, and that is exactly what we confronted today. In closing, I'd like to stress again that Scott has been a great coach for the Thunder, and he's earned his rightful place in the history of this franchise. This has been a long few days, and we've been incredibly thorough as we've worked through this. What allows us to make this transition today are the values of this organization, the pride and confidence that we have in our players, that we have in our staff, and understanding that we're all accountable and committed to working to improve the Thunder, and the continued belief that we have to put the organization's needs above all else, even in the most challenging of circumstances.
Sam, just how much contact did you have, I guess, with Kevin or Russell or anyone from the, at least as far as the players wise, before you made this decision?
Well, first and foremost, we wouldn't consult if you're asking me, like, are we consulting the players? No, I think that would be a terribly unfair position to put players in, to ask them to input on or make decisions about staff and personnel. Obviously, you know, they're aware of the decision and have been made aware of the decision, but they're not an active participant in that.
Sam, if you've made this decision now and you say it's not based on the results of this decision, why then wouldn't you have released Scott after last year, before this season started?
Can you say that again? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, why you're saying that this season, which was injury riddled and all of that, and you don't make the postseason, had nothing to do with the decision you made today. Why then wouldn't you have released Scott after last season, heading into this year?
Sure. Fair question. You know, I think every season's unique for us, and every season you learn something, and we certainly wouldn't have brought Scott back to the organization last season if we didn't have great confidence in him. But obviously, you know, we are constantly looking at how to improve, how to evolve, as I said earlier, and the circumstances surrounding this situation and this period of time are different than what we were facing last year at this time.
What happened from the end of last season to now to make you decide that you needed to go in a different direction?
I think, you know, again, I think what we're really not trying to do is to look necessarily toward the past to set the agenda for the future. I think what we're really trying to do is look at where we want to go and make this a transition and be in a position where we're transitioning during a period of time where we think we can stimulate the program as is and make it about looking forward. So I understand exactly what you're asking. Unfortunately, we can't make decisions based simply on 1 year or 2 years. And in this case, we have to make them based on looking forward, not just next year, but most importantly also the years following as well.
Had you made the playoffs, you think you would have come to the same conclusion? And when did you start thinking about doing this?
First part of the question, you know, again, it's really hypothetical, but it's not about necessarily last season. It's about us looking forward and really identifying really an opportunity where we feel like we can continue to push the organization ahead. Second question was, when did I start thinking about it? Well, I think you're always evaluating and thinking to yourself, you know, how do we improve and how do we grow, and where are those opportunities as an organization that's focused on building a sustainable team and a great organization. Those are questions you have to ask yourself. But one thing that's really important for us, honestly, Myron, is like when we get to the end of the year and we say like we're going to take some time away to really kind of decompress and let things settle, that's the reason why, so that we're not making quick decisions, or we're ensuring that we're trying to make thoughtful decisions. And I think over the last several days, you know, we really tried to study this in a way that plotted out as many different scenarios, and knowing we had to do what we thought was best for the organization going forward.
Who's we, Sam? When you say we, who's we? Who's in your circle that made this decision or helped you arrive at this decision?
Well, you know, number one, like ultimately the decision that gets made, I have to make that decision. You know, that's the responsibility that I carry as I'm in this chair. It's my work to do, and you know, I do it the best that I can. But you know, I'll speak to different people to understand as many dynamics as I can on my staff, and be as observant as I can during situations to project out where I think we need to go.
Does the success of first-year guys like Steve Kerr and Brad Stevens influence your thinking at all?
You know, not necessarily. We haven't really determined, you know, any type of criteria on what it is that we're looking to identify going forward. I think we have an idea, but our decision is not made based on anything external. Our decision is really based on really identifying what we need, what we feel the Thunder needs at this point in time in our career, in our organizational arc.
What was it that Scott lacked that made you not want to make that long-term commitment to him
after this season?
Well, one thing that I'm really trying to stress, and I want to try to make as clear as possible that this is not necessarily about something Scotty was lacking or things of that nature. It was more us trying to look at ourselves as we look to the future, and I'd rather not be clear about anything specific than ever get anything misconstrued or ever come across as being critical of anything Scott Brooks has done, because his contributions to this organization stand on their own. And we certainly wouldn't be in a position where we are right now where we feel like we're able to make this transition with some momentum without the work of him and the other assistant coaches that have been through this program over the last several years during his tenure.
Will there be any other staff changes, coaching changes?
We haven't had we just haven't had a chance to get to that, Anthony. To be honest with you, we're really focused on today, and obviously today was a long day, and the days leading up to this were really long.
Sam, you mentioned in the release earlier today, and then again just a second ago, Scott's rightful place in history with the organization. Obviously, we can see records and numbers, but can you further define that from your perspective?
Sure. I mean, he was a part of a lot of firsts for this organization. I couldn't rattle off all of them, but I talk all the time about the contributions that we all make and that people make to the formative years of an organization, and that the contributions that this first group of people, all of us that have had the privilege of working in Oklahoma City in the first 10 years, their contributions are going to last much longer than their tenure with the organization, and I feel incredibly confident that, and Scott should be recognized, but also, he, as I said before, he is a rightful place in a lot of things that have happened here, not just the winning and the success that we've had, as you mentioned, Jenny, but also just I think he's helped define some real positive things about how to go about your business every day. So when I tell you I have the deepest respect for him as a person, I really mean that, and that's what makes a day like today for me very challenging. But at the same time, I recognize that my job is to direct the organization in a way that I feel best positions us to continue this ambitious approach to building a great organization, and with that comes very challenging conversations and challenging decisions.
Sam, is there a timetable to hire your next coach? Do you want to have somebody in place in a week, a month? What?
We wouldn't put a timetable on anything. We're going to start to work on that this evening, and but I couldn't give you a time frame just because we have to go through that process of identifying and understanding ultimately who would be interested in the position. So I would be being irresponsible if I gave you a period of time.
What are you looking for?
Qualifications are you looking for in the head coach?
Well, I want to. The first thing I would say is we've got a pretty clear identity. I know of the type of person and specific vision for that role going forward. But I'm hesitant to speak a little directly about it, just because I don't want to get into comparing and contrasting. What we're looking for in the person we had in Scott, who we had in that position, prior. But I think we have a clear idea of what we'd like to see, and we'll have to start that process of identifying, who might be a good fit for us.
Have you already started making, any type of contact with anyone that might be on a future list?
No, we haven't had any contact with anybody. I understand, in these situations, the speculation and the ether of social media, but no. And, I think everybody understands that our focus this past 4 or 5 days and since the season ended is, one, to try to step away and remove ourselves from the recency of the season, and then spend our time evaluating, this particular decision, which was challenging enough quite frankly, to figure out and ultimately move forward with.
Sam, is this a shift in philosophy or diving deeper into an existing philosophy within this organization?
That's a great question. I want to make sure I understand it so I can answer it correctly.
Speaking in terms of the approach to game preparation, offensive, defensive,
Oh, okay.
all of those kind of things.
I think all those things, will be considered, but I don't want to get into anything specific, but philosophically, I think everybody understands what it is that we generally look for in people and players and leaders, and there'll be a continuation of that approach, I think, going forward.
I know you said you didn't consult players or anything, but going forward, you got some pretty important guys in the next couple of years have some decisions to make. How do you handle that whole dynamic when you go out and find a new coach in terms of, do you talk to them? How do you handle that?
Sure. I think one of the things that we have in place, and we're very fortunate to have, is we have a set of players that have been here for a long time. They've helped establish the identity for the Thunder. They've set the internal standards and the environment that we work by on a day-to-day basis. So I think that just inherently they're going to have a pretty good idea of synonymously like what it is that we'll be looking for, and ultimately aligned with the fact that we're trying to improve, we're trying to push ourselves, to progress, and I think one thing is that they understand that we're not going to shy away from or back away from a difficult decision if we think that it can help us win. And I think that's where the alignment is. I think we've got some serious players that are competitive, and I want to continually try to create an environment for them to play their best basketball and to win at the highest level. And as I look forward, that's going to be what we're trying to accomplish.
Sam, you used the word both in your release this morning and this evening, stimulate a couple times. Well, so exactly what why you use that word, and what exactly you think you mean?
Sure. Well, I think as I said earlier, I think change in organizations sometimes is necessary, and you get to certain points where I think as much as the continuity that we've experienced has been an incredible benefit for us. When you make a transition of this kind, sometimes change can stimulate and I don't want to know the right word other than stimulate. To stimulate or I guess push the team in some other ways. I don't want to say that Scott was at a point where he was not able to do that, but sometimes change can be healthy. At the same time, if you're not willing to embrace that at certain points in time, I think then you run the risk of starting like potential regression, because you're not willing to embrace that. You're not willing to embrace the fact that improvement comes from having to make some tough decisions. So I'm hopeful that we're able to stimulate and push the group forward, even though that it's difficult in the present.
Is a new voice, could that be a factor in that? Or?
Well, I think that could be part of it for sure. I think, but that's not to say that Scott was ineffective whatsoever this past season. But I think at the same time, anytime players or organizations experience a change of any kind, it is going to be slightly different. And as I said earlier, the fact that the next person that assumes this role is going to have a wonderful foundation to kind of pick up on is very much due in part to Scott and his staff. So that's why, to me, as I look at this, I see this as a transition, and a transition that is embracing the fact that there'll be a different voice, there'll be a different person, and that's going to affect the players differently. And sometimes that can be very healthy.
Sam, we often talk about, or you said tonight, you don't consult players on decisions like this. On the other hand, will you welcome their input as to who the next coach will be?
Well, I'm certainly not going to lock myself in my office and ignore people. But at the same time, I think there's a genuine respect for the fact that we have to make decisions that best serve the organization, and we're very fortunate. I think that we have a group of people that have been together for a fair amount of time, and there's a certain understanding of like what it is that we value. But we have to look at creating an environment, as we move forward, that continues to preserve a lot of the qualities that we have in place that are very valuable and very important to our success, but also trying to grow some other areas as well.
Not speaking specifically about anybody, but what's the challenges for potentially a college coach having to transfer into the pros? What are the challenges they face?
I'm sure there's a bunch of them. I think for us, if you're asking me specifically, like, would we consider a college coach? Is that kind of what you're really trying to ask me? Okay. I can answer that better. What I would say to that, Anthony, is this. We're not going to limit ourselves or limit the scope of people we would look at for this position. It's going to, at the end of the day, be directed by the vision of our team, the values of the organization, and the best person we feel like can assume a leadership role for this organization, going forward. Not based on one season, but somebody that we feel like can reestablish our continuity, and who is a fit for so many aspects of what it is here. And I said before, I truly believe this. Working in Oklahoma City is an incredibly what's the right word I'm looking for? I'm blanking. It's really great to work here because fulfilling, because the team is a local team that competes nationally, and it has a civic purpose to it, I believe, because it exists for the people and because of the people that come every night. So I think that anytime you work here, and certainly in a position like a head coach, I think it's important that person really embraces the overall purpose of the work that gets done with the Thunder. And I think it's a privilege to work here for that reason.
Deciding what next year is going to be like for you guys from last year. You have under contract with Durant. What kind of challenges would a new coach face with that kind of pressure?
Well, I mean, I think you're hitting on a real key aspect. I think heading into that season, listen, we understand that there'll be an incredible amount of attention paid to next season. There'll be a lot of different distractions that it's our job to try to manage, not to eliminate, but to just try to manage through it so that we can play our best basketball. But I think, and that's kind of one of the things I was alluding to earlier, I think at times, I think the risk is not necessarily in moving forward, but I think sometimes the risk can be in being fearful of moving forward. And you identify somebody that you feel like can help the organization, that is a good fit here. I believe that's kind of part of the job. But no matter what the circumstances are, we have to be able to put it in its proper place and understand that we got to play good basketball, knowing that there'll be an interpretation to anything that happens, outside, or what the weather is and all those types of things. But I think we're prepared for that, the best of our ability, and we're going to go about our business that way.
Well, with that in mind, and it being the last year of Kevin's contract, it's obviously a very attractive job, but I'm sure the new coach is going to want to know what Katie and Russ are thinking about their future. How do you answer that question when it's broached in the interview process?
Well, I mean, it's the same way that I would answer it to you, which is, number one, we were incredibly grateful to have those guys part of the organization, and especially for them to have started here. We've never really consumed ourselves or focused on the stuff that we can't forecast or control. What we have focused on and what we've continued to focus on, and I think what today is also a reflection of, is we focus on relentlessly trying to build the best organization that we can, making decisions that we think are, intentional about acting on that vision, and believing that, for us, that's the best way to continue to create an environment where those guys have a chance to play at the highest level for the prime of their careers. I think if we take our eye off the ball, and I think if we start trying to operate differently than that, I don't think that's when we're really serving the program to the best of our ability. And I think it's more about investing in the program and trying to continue to get better, because that's what those guys are, I think, about themselves.
How did Scott take the news? What was your give and take with him today?
Well, I think you can appreciate, Barry, that I'd like to keep that conversation, between us. I did go out there to see him in Los Angeles. Thought that was important, and beyond that, I don't really want to delve into it. But those conversations are they're never easy.
What about Kevin and Russell last week? We were here and they were all talked about liking him as a coach and so forth and so on. What was their reaction and surge and guys like that?
Well, first, I wouldn't expect our players to say anything different. And a lot of the things that those guys said are the way that so many of us feel about Scotty as as a coach and as a person. I think that I wouldn't expect him to say anything different. I think going forward, I think they'll probably be focused on what's next for us, understanding that there's needs to be a great appreciation for everything that Scott has done and invested in the team, but also that the focus now is looking to the future and what best positions us to improve and get better.
As you look coming out of last year and just some of the areas that you think the team and besides obviously finding a coach needs improvement on, just what are some of those areas?
Well, I think again, I want to be really careful, Mike, just because I don't want to have anything that I say misconstrued as something that is critical of Scotty. Because as I said, given the circumstances, I think he did an excellent job, and I conveyed that during the year. But I still do think you can learn a lot as a team going through, the season that we had. I'm proud of our players and how they continued to battle. I thought we saw some growth in a lot of our guys. Guys got some opportunities that maybe they weren't necessarily planning on, or we weren't necessarily planning on. And then I think making some of the acquisitions and seeing some different faces like a Cantor or a Singler or Augustine and Novak. I think it's exciting for us, as we look to the future, because as I said, I think that there's a transition to what it is that we're doing here, and I think that once we're able to get everyone together, we feel good about the direction of the franchise.
Sam, were you unhappy about the direction of the defense the team was playing?
I think we have to somewhat be cognizant of the different changes in terms of health that we were dealing with. If anything, I think what it's really established is like that Serge, at this point in time, is pretty pivotal piece to our formula. He's an elite rim protector. and allows a lot of our other guys to be, who they are. But I'm confident that we'll be an improved defensive team with some better health and just some more time together.
Where are you with Ennis, and are you encouraged? Are you optimistic?
Sure, we're really happy to have Ennis, as a restricted free agent. I don't want to categorize how we feel about the pending contract, but I would say that we wouldn't have traded for him if we didn't feel like we were going to be in a position to have him with us going forward. And what we're really trying to do, Dean, is really capitalize on kind of where we are from a team building standpoint relative to the CBA and this influx of new money that is going to be striking the system. And one of the things that we really feel good about is, at the end of the season last year, our rotation was an average age of 30. And at this point now, as we look forward, we're going to, have the average age be 26. And that's important for us because obviously the core players on our team are 26 years old. And our vision has been to strategically, within the rules of the system that we've had to deal with, the two different systems we've had to deal with, is to build a team that, you could have your prime players entering, their years with a collection of other players that are either in their pre-prime or prime years that could be kept together. And have the financial flexibility within the rules to be confident to do that. And it's been a process for us to get to the point where we can do this, but we're now kind of getting to that point, and this is a big part of that. Singler's a big part of that. Augustine and Novaker have years going forward, and then obviously we're going to be having the 14th pick in this draft, at least if nothing changes. We'll have the 14th pick in this draft, so we feel like there's a nice bandwidth of emerging talent that has their best basketball in front of them as we position the team for the prime years of our best players.
How does this, you got to find a coach and you got the draft to get ready for.
Mm-hmm.
How does that impact, I guess you're the point man on finding the coach, I assume, and so how does that impact that?
Well, it'll be, I'm doing a lot of listening. That's one of the things that I think is really important to our decision making. It's a much more Socratic, approach to how we look at things, and we'll have a lot of different things that we've got to work on. But that's the job. We have to find a way to do great work, given the fact that we've got some different things going on. I'm very, very fortunate to have a great group of people that work in this building that none of you ever really get to see on a daily basis. But I listen to every single one of them because I believe that every single one of them has the best interest of the Thunder in mind. And as we make those decisions, everyone will be listened to.
Russ just won a scoring title. Did you?
I'm sorry.
Russ just won a scoring
yeah.
title. Did you see something like that being possible when you drafted him? And, the way the league has changed, it plays towards kind of what he does.
Yeah.
Did you see that coming, or did you guys kind of luck into the guy that fits what's going on in the league now?
I would say luck would be an understatement. I think that, listen, this is what I can tell you about Russell. And Troy Weaver, whom has worked with us for the last 7 years, is really a driving force behind, I think, that decision with me. But the one thing about Russell that I think I was and we were confident about is whatever he had in him, he was going to get out, because this is a driven individual. He's intrinsically motivated. He has a sense of competition that you don't see often. So I think he was going to maximize himself. I think that's one of the reasons why him and Kevin are such great ambassadors for our organization, because I believe that they love the work. They're intrinsically motivated. They're good citizens, and they've got a great competitive will, both of them. But Russell, I wish I could tell you that we saw that coming, but that's not happening. He's just a guy that's driven, and we got really fortunate, as we have several other times with some of these guys. But I'm proud that they're with us.
Last one. I think you can make a list about 15, 20 guys. They either wouldn't want the job or if contractually couldn't have it. Everybody else in the world would love to have your job, have the job you have open.
They can have my job some days.
Not your job. Scotty's
Trust me.
job. How do you pare that down? Surely you got a core list of candidates.
Yeah.
Can somebody still get into that group if they want to? I mean, how do you?
Well, I mean,
such an awesome landscape there. With
yeah.
possibility. How do you even start this process?
Well, I think first of all, I think you have to have a pretty good sense of, what you think is most valued in terms of the role, fit with the organization, and I also think the role moving forward. Within the league, in the context of the NBA, because as I said before, the NBA is constantly changing and it's constantly evolving. So we have to forecast that out. I think the other piece to that is, I think really kind of an idea of what you think works and what you think fits, with this particular group, and trying to prioritize those things. Listen, I don't think that there's going to be a simple solution or a perfect situation. We're not the perfect team. We're not the perfect program. That's why we're constantly evaluating, trying to make ourselves better. But it will be it'll be thorough, and it will be based on the things that I think drive the Thunder, and what we've tried to instill in driving the Thunder as we go forward, which will be, finding someone that can really embrace, like I said before, the role in Oklahoma City and the community piece that is so important to us, and we feel like can help our players and our team progress to a level that we haven't been to, and evolve, because I think that's just there's a natural evolution to teams. We can't hit a pause button. The teams are constantly moving and changing and growing, and we want to capitalize on that, and make it a transition versus, making a change out of reaction.
Thank you, Sam.